Imagine needing a seasonal CFO or CTO, but only for a fraction of time. That's the premises behind the surge of fractional executives, experienced C-suite leaders working part-time to multiple organizations. It's just not a hype. It's a major reshape leadership in 2024-25. More than 110,000 professionals on LinkedIn have identified themselves as fractional leaders, up by just 2,000 in 2022. This is based on the HRV.com's report. US Bureau of Labor Statistics reported 57% increase in fractional executives roles in 2020. We've started as a tickle often, a fraction of CFOs in startups has become a flood across functions. From functional chief marketing officers, CMOs, to chief information security officers. This report explores why startup founders, HR heads, and even CEOs at enterprises are embracing the fractional executives and how this model works in practical. Well, dive into 2025 data on the fractional boom, real world stories of companies using fractional to scale the cost versus benefit trade offs from both company executives and actionable frameworks for implementing roles. The goal is a no flop energetic rundown suit for 30 minutes solo podcast blending Gen Z with strategic clarity. Now, let's dive into it. Welcoming one and all who've joined the podcast today. We are talking about the rise of fractional CEOs and executives in the C-suite level. What is that is led to this surge in fractional executives roles in 2023-2025 trends? We'll talk about these pointers where we speak about real world examples of fractional leadership in across action, why companies benefit from fractional leaders, why executives opt for fractional roles, trade offs and challenges of fractional leadership for companies integrating attention and alignment worries, for fractional executives, hustle or juggle, framework how to scope, recruit, structure a framework or a fractional executive role. Transition to fractional executive careers, tips for professionals, concluding the embracing of fractional future. That's the pointers that we are talking about, and this is what we want to look at. Starting with the surge, what we spoke about in the start of the session. Not long ago, fractional executives were auditory. Now it is practical mainstream. Trend of data of the recent years has grown booming numbers. By 2024 there were estimation of 110,000 fractional leaders, doubling from 60,000 in 2022, which was reported on the columncontent.com. For prospective fractional sales leaders alone doubled from 5,000 in 2020 to 9,000 in 2024-25, again reported by columncontent.com. As the mid of 2024-25, over 110 LinkedIn users call themselves fractional leaders, up to 2K was in 2022. That's what we saw. Again, a HBR.org report highlighting how rapidly this model has gained traction. Across C-suites, what we see is most of the CFOs fractional roles now are open to CFOs, COOs, CTOs, CMOs, CHROs, CEOs, CISOs, CSOs, and CIOs. And Google search data shows interesting skyrocketing search from fractional CMO jumping from 337% in 2022 versus 2021. The fractional CFO surge jumped from plus 535% again at the time. This was reported by chrismedia.ca, where we found this research. The momentum has continued into 2024-25 as the business in need experts found part-time executives an attractive solution. Now, how this is looking at executive intervention, CEOs themselves are planning for more fractional hires. A recent study found 72% of CEOs plan to increase their fractional executives in coming year. marketbusinessinsider.com reports this. The focus is highly specialized skill sets, so called micro CXOs who parachute in for targeted needs. Again, reported by marketsbusinessinsiders.com. In other words, demand is being driven from top companies seeking flexibility, talent, and leadership level. How is the industry adopting in this? Fractional CEOs are especially popular in fast moving sectors. Over the half of fractional leaders work with tech SaaS companies, followed by manufacturing, healthcare, finance, and non-profit organizations. Again, column content report the same structure which was looking at this trend. This makes sense where tech firms and SaaS firms often scale quickly and need expert leaders on a budget, while the sector of healthcare or finance may tap fractionals for regularity and a specialized guidance. Even traditional conservative industries, construction, education, power, government, etc., are gradually embracing this function fractionals. Remote work has enabled much from the pandemic year. Rise of remote work removed barriers for our fractional arrangements. It was a normal for fractional executives to zoom into Tuesday meetings for a company A and a Wednesday meeting for a strategy session for company B. In interviews, fractional leaders note COVID 19 normalized working from anywhere, making it feasible or juggling multiple organizations. Again, this was reported by Harvard Business Review, and this is there on the internet. Location is less of an issue, so the startups can hire fractional CTOs based in Silicon Valley, for examples, right? Talent pool maturity. Typical fractional executive is very experienced. This is largely a veteran game. In 2024 alone, survey about 72% of fractional executives had 15 years of experience in this field. There are junior freelancers, there are often former Fortune 500 executives, serial entrepreneurs, or serial seasoned consultants opting for a portfolio career. The independent workforce overall surge projected to grow from 19% in 2022 to a larger extent, and many senior professionals are choosing fractional consulting over the traditional full time roles. In short, fractional leadership has gone from niche experiment to the new normal in the CEO suit. Companies of all sizes are tapping this trend and looking for some real-time examples on how fractional executives put the work in startups, scale-ups, and enterprise. Real-time examples, what we spoke about is turbocharging growth for startups. Startups can't often afford or do not yet need a full-time executive, but till they still required a high level strategy. For instance, a tech startup preparing to raise a Series B round brought on a fractional CFO for 1 year to get his finance investors ready. The fractional CFO provided robust financial strategy and rigor, helping them to streamline operations and successfully secure B, a Series B funding. This is again reported by Minority Business Review.com. In effect, the companies got Silicon Valley caliber finance leaders just long enough to level up the transaction to permanent CFO fundraising. Post fundraising, startups are also using fractional CTOs to build out products, architecture, or fractional general counsels to navigate early legal hurdles only until the framework is in place. Scale up mid level companies are looking at scaling smart with the help. A mid sized consumer goods company facing a fierce e-commerce competition hired a fractional CMO with deep digital marketing expertise. Over the 6 months, the CMO crafted comprehensive online strategy, overwhelming that led to the digital presence. The result, online sales jumped by 30% in 6 months. Beyond the numbers from the fractional CMO also trained the internal team to market modern practices, essential upskilling the company within. Example of a manufacturing firm experiencing growth panics engaged a fractional COO to strengthen operations in just the year in a year. This CO implemented lean processes and boosted production capability or capacity by 40%, cutting costs by 15%. This is again reported by Minority Business uh, Review.com's pointers. These are transformational outcomes achieved without long-term cost for a full-time fix crucial issues and set companies going up to success. Now, looking at, we spoke about scale ups and startup. What will happen to the large enterprises is what we want to look at on how the fractional leaders are going to come into picture. Just give me a second. Yeah. Uh, what is happening on the larger this one is fresh strategy for bridging transitions. Even big organizations are looking at fractional leveraging fractional leaders executives targeted ways in a targeted ways. So for example, a B2B firm shipping in the shipping industry, let's call it Acme Shipping, was undervalued by the market despite the size. They engaged a fractional CMO and a brand expert to unify and elevate their brand across acquisition. Over 17 months, the fractional CMO framed the company's value proposition and the market strategy. The impact was dramatic. Within a year, the new strategy launched by AME shares rose 50%, and the year on year revenue jumped by 51%. This is an illustration that fractional leaders aren't just small company solutions, they can drive major turnaround on large enterprises too. Another real use case is a big company during leadership gaps of an instance. When a Fortune thousand firms suddenly lost a CIO. It brought a fractional CEO in 6 months to maintain its IT strategy and mentor internal deputies for full timers was hired till the time the full timer was hired. In highly specialized areas like cybersecurity, some enterprises also look at fractional CISOs and to look at audit bolster defenses on prime time basis, especially if they cannot find a qualified full timer quickly. Now, these are cases where fractional executives can deliver serious results from scrappy startups to established corporations. Fractional leaders have raised capital, jumping startup growth initiatives, brands overwhelming, bridged critical leadership gaps. They offer a plug and play kind of an expertise exactly when and where it is needed. But why companies and executives drawn to this agreement? Let's break down cost benefits, trade-offs from both sides. Why companies benefit from fractional leaders? Let's look at that pointer at this moment. So, for organizations, executives offer a compelling value proposition, right? Here are some of the core benefits that companies can make from ventures to mature firms eager to leverage fractional leadership, cost effective uh, expertise. Perhaps the biggest draw is getting seasoned executives talent at a fraction of a cost. Instead of a full time six salaries figure plus bonuses and benefits, a company can only pay a portion of time that they need. This saves significant money and still provides high value guidance, especially startups and SMEs, which are limited budgets. A fractional CFO or CTO delivers a top tier strategy without breaking the bank. Even larger companies appreciate the ROI. That is, for example, we are paying a fractional expert for a short term. Fractional projects can be cheaper than a permanent hire for a less cost than falling at the address of the problem, right? As one advisor put it, seasoned leaders at a fraction of cost for full-time hires. That's what we are talking about, how the rise of fractional executives is happening. Now, flexibility and on-demand engagement. Fractional arrangements are highly flexible. Companies can engage leaders only when needed and for few days only. It can be a few days in a week, for a month, 6 months. This is on demand model, means the scale you can scale the leadership involving up to down as the business evolves. For example, you might start a fractional CMO for 2 days in a week during the product launch, then down for the few months on the going as an advisor. There are long term commitments if you can need to change. The agility is ideal for companies who flux. You get it right expertise on the right time without being locked into a permanent position. Now, looking at, I can give you certain examples that we are looking at. What we've seen is when there is a CISO requirement, we've seen people coming into places where they want to look at having a security officer who can help them build strategies, build security and compliance, build a posture for security posture for them, have them on a call basis, on a weekly 2 day basis or a monthly basis. When there is a review, he can come and look at the progress, give them the advice. That's where the fractional executives are coming up, lining up, and this is where we see a lot of things happening on the fractional executive part. Now, coming into the next part, specialized skills and fresh perspective. Fractional executives often have a deep niche expertise that may be hard to hire for a full time. Need supply chain guru to untangle your logistics, or a veteran CISO to set up a cybersecurity protocol. A fractional hire can inject skill immediately. Moreover, because they have worked across multiple companies and multiple industries, they bring broad perspective and fresh idea. They have seen all before. In the way of internal promoting might not work, the cross pollination of the best practice can spark innovation. Companies benefit from an outsider who isn't struck or in how we are always done. As one case showed us, a fractional executive reframed a company strategy precisely because he had an outsider's viewpoint. And when you have an outsider's viewpoint, he looks at pointers that are only looking at bringing the strategy and the bring aligning the business to what the vision and mission of the organization, and leading the mm, organization to huge gains in the market value. Now, spend versus impact. We look at that from a fractional executive hire. Hiring a full-time executives can take months to recruit and onboard. In contrast, fractional leaders are often available to jump in a quick call. Critical time when is of is the essence. They are used in hitting the ground running. Companies facing urgent challenges, a sudden growth spurt, a crisis, a project deadline, can deploy fractional talent in weeks, not in months. These hires are outcome based focused. They are rather delivery results fast. Then, whether they are raising from the next funding round or launching a new product or turning around a department, the impact can be felt within a quarter or two. As many cases have studied illustrated, 30% sales growth in half year from a fractional CEO strategy. Lower the risk. You can try before you buy. That's the pointer that we are looking at from a fractional executive pointer. We see that when you bring a full-time executive, it's a big commitment. It If the fit is wrong, it is going to be costly and disruptive to unwind. A fractional arrangement significantly lowers this kind of risk. They allow both sides try before you buy. A company can see the executive in action and evaluate whether he is fit over few months. If it is working great, some of the fractionals do convert to a full time, or a fractional can even help their hire the full time replacement. If not, the engagement can end when the contract ends with far less drama. This is a triability is reassuring, especially for organizations who are unsure if the roles justify full time. It is essential for a low interim risk solution. Even if purely short term, a fractional executive can stabilize things while you search for a permanent hire. ensuring continuity in the leaders. In summary, what we are trying to talk about here is the companies get maximum bang on for their buck, high caliber leadership, flexible terms. They can tackle specialized problems and scale leadership involvement, matching growth and avoiding long term overhead. It is about efficiency rather than effectiveness. The right expertise, the right time, and when it is needed. Of course, from executive side, this model has its own appeal as well. Looking at these fractional why fractional executive opt for fractional roles. It's not that companies are driving this fractional trend. Many executives are willing to jump into fractional careers. Why? Because it's a seasonal leader gives up a security for a single employer of a portfolio or gigs. Here's the key benefits: attracting talent for fractional flexibility and autonomy. That is the first point. Second point, variety and challenge, where we see why people are looking. Leverage of expertise. Okay, that's the third point. And portfolio career and earning potential. This is the, and balance stress, which is the pointers that they look at. Now let's deep dive into flexibility and autonomy. By far, the top reason is flexibility in lifestyle and work. In 2025 survey of the fractional professional, a whopping 83.3% said flexibility was the first motivator for going into a fractional role instead of a 9 to 5 job, or more 9 to 9 grind of a corporate executive role. Fractionals can set their own schedules. To an extent, they might take off a week between the client engagement or choose to work 3 days a week. They have a huge uh, leverage. They also have autonomy to select projects, industries they find exciting, especially and essentially fractional executive regain control of their time. A value may start prioritizing post COVID. This can mean better work-life balance, semi-retirement while still staying engaged professionals as a professionally, or as a fractional leader put in get into more schedule and avoiding getting caught up in the weeds of one's operations. Now what is that we are looking at? Variety and challenge. Variety is a spice of fractional life. But 65% of fractionals said they enjoyed diversity in experience, working with different businesses and industries. For natural curious or multi-talent executives, fractional work was intellectual and simulating one. 1 week you are adver- adversing a fintech, and the next week you are optimizing a process for healthcare company. This is a constant learning, keeping things fresh, and allows executives to apply their skills in the context. It also increases personal marketability. They gain exposure to multi business models quickly, and many fractional love challenge. They can parachute into situations and solve problems, then move on to the next adventure. Once it is resolved, a fractional CPO said, let him accelerate my learning impact by working in multiple companies, similar challenges. This is again reported by Harvard Business Reviews. Boredom is rarely an issue there. Now, coming into leveraging of expertise, making a difference. Executives often have wealth of knowledge built over decades. Fractional roles let them fully leverage expertise while it is needed mostly. Instead of being on holder in one company on dealing internal politics, they can also focus on high impact work. They can excel. It is a satisfying to drop an organization and immediately provide value by applying hard won experience to say fix a broke supply chain, craft market strategy. Many find meaningful in helping multiple businesses succeed rather than dedicating all the energy to one employer. They act as an expert, a problem solver for a hire. They also allow them to build personal brand as an authority in their domain, which is can be gratifying at the. Now, looking at how does this build portfolio of careers and earning potential, fractional executives effectively become free agents in the talent market. Some of some of them use their model to build portfolio career. They might try serve a board, do some fractional work, perhaps run a side venture of a consultant. This diversification can be both enjoyable and financially rewarding. While they give a single big pay, they can often earn equal or better total compensation by billing multiple. For example, a fractional CFO typically charges somewhere around $100 to $400 per hour based on the work, based on the SOW that is preparing, and often work on retainers around 15K to 30K per month per client. With two clients, then they can revival the full-time CFO salary, and there are within three it can exceed. They they have multiple income streams which they can feel more secure than one employment. If one of the engagement ends, the other still provides the revenue. Many fractional CEOs enjoy being effective on their own bosses, running one person's business and choosing whom they want to work with. What is that it brings when it comes to stress when we are working at a single organization? Interestingly, some of the executives turn to fractional roles to reduce burnout and job stress. About 45% in the survey cited seeking low stress a reason going for fractionals. Now, fractionals can certainly be intense. You are often tackling hairy problems, but the key difference is duration and variety. You might sprint for a client, then have a downtime. You also can less entangle in office politics and endless meetings. You brought into an executive not to sit through all hands. You One could say you go get do or be the fun part of the job, skip some of the bureaucracy. And that is said, this is the benefit they can have or vary. Some fractional CEOs do feel they trade off on one kind of stress or the other more on the shortly. But for many, the ability to take breaks is the bigger challenge or the pointer that they want to look between engage back commitments when needed with a huge plus of mental energy and health. In an essence, fractional executives got the freedom to design their work life. They keep their skills sharp, diverse challenges, avoiding monotony, and often achieve elusive work life integration into a single full time role. Offer it's a change to be all in when you are in, you and off when you are off. What we are trying to say is it gives you a flexibility in terms of when you are there on a job and you have committed the hours, you are on, and when you are off, you are truly off at the work that you are looking at. It is not all rosy. There are downsides and difficulties for this model, both parties. Let's address the trade-offs and how we can navigate that. What is that we see as trade-offs and challenges in fraction leadership? Every innovation comes with a challenge, and the fractional arrangements are not exceptional. It is important to acknowledge the trade-offs and pain points that both companies and the fractional executives need to manage. Being upfront about these allows to address head on. For companies who can look at integration, attention, and alignment worries. From company's perspective, the biggest concern is often will part-time leader be as effective as a full-time? Key challenges look at integration into the team. We know as a contractor how do we look at having a fractional execute parachute in and has a gel with the existing leadership team or the company culture very quickly. Unlike a full timer who lives and breathes inside the company, a fractional might only be on site or online for few days a week. This can be harder to integrate and build relations. This is where one challenge is what we've seen: continuous availability. When what if a crisis happens and on a off day? Because this fractional split time, companies may fear they won't be available at a critical mentioned time. There is also continuity concern. A fractional CFO, for example, might be with you for 6 months, while all the knowledge walk out of the door when the contract ends. Business have to ensure knowledge transfer to the internal staff to avoid dis- disruption, especially if you are getting less face time and many may have to share your staff to your star executive to other clients. Some of the CEOs find this uneasy if they are used or dedicated in the right hand person. Communication gaps is one more pointer. I see there's a question which is coming. Okay, let's have this communication gap is one thing that we've seen, which we often look at. Fractional CEOs often work remote or part-time on-site. Maintaining smooth communications can be tricky. Out of sight can mean out of mind at times. If you are not deliberate, missed meetings or slow response on off days could hinder the progress. Collaborations requires effort. Both fractional executives and the team must proactively keep each other in the loop. If if the rest of the team is co-located, the fractional is remote, this dynamic needs to be carefully managed. Companies must have set clear protocols, example weekly sync ups, who's the fractional reporting to, etc., to keep everyone aligned. Poor communication is one recipe of the mistakes that are frustrated in this model. Now, coming into what is the expectations from the management, it is critical for a company to set and manage expectations about fractional leadership will deliver within the scope. If the organization secretly hopes their 2 day week fractional CTO will work like a full-time CTO, disappointment looms. Conversations that fractional might assume decision making authority in the company isn't ready to give. Misalignment expectations can cause dissatisfaction for both sides. Company needs to be realistic about fractional bandwidth and clarify priorities, especially if you are buying X hours of an experienced person. Use the time wisely, strategic matter, and not drowning in them into trivial meetings. So, next is over resilience risk. Ironically, a successful fractional executive can become indispensable, which poses a risk they if they depend. If company leans too heavily on a fractional one instead of having empowerment internal team members, they might find themselves in a blind spot when the contract ends. For example, a startup might find defer hiring VP or a finance because the fractional CFO is handling everything. But if the fractional suddenly gets fully booked elsewhere, the startup is left scrambled. Companies might be balancing leveraging the fractional skills with building internal capabilities for long term. An ideal scenario for fractional leader not only delivers results but also mentors some of the internal people with documentation, process, and organizations left square when they roll off. Despite these challenges, most can be mitigated with a good planning and communication. Many companies decide the benefit overweight these risks, but they go on with the eyes open. Strategies to be addressed integration and address continuity to this. There are multiple pointers that we can look at, and the fractional pointers that we are talking about can loom up as large as it. So the role of a fractional executive is looking at we have the expertise only when required. That's what we are talking about, and this is what I wanted to present, how this practical uh, leadership has risen over the period that we are seeing most of the executives choosing fractional leadership to have the kind of time that they want to bring in. I am bringing up a slide which is showing about how the fractional leadership is coming in. Let me bring up that slide for you. Yeah, this is the trend that we have seen over the fractional executives that has grown over the last few years. 2022 it was 60K, and it has gone up to 150K. That's what we are seeing as a trend. With this, I would like to conclude my session for today with this topic. We would be conducting a next session tomorrow, which is going to be talking about leadership. How do you show up the presence of leadership is what we are going to talk on tomorrow's session at 6:30. Hope you found this session valuable, and looking forward to see you tomorrow in our session. Thank you.